and welcome back to our monthly program of the Laguna Woods Democratic Club. Today, we have a fantastic surprise for you. We have Congressman Mike Levin speaking to us about his work and the problem in general of the environment today and climate change. Before we get started with our main speaker, I want to introduce Jean Lepowski, who's going to give us a brief moment of reflection. Jean?
Ruby Bridges was the first child of Lucille and Abon Bridges, who were farmers in Mississippi. The family moved to New Orleans, Louisiana, when Ruby was 2. Ruby attended a segregated kindergarten, but then a federal court ordered Louisiana schools to be desegregated. For the first grade, Ruby's parents made the difficult decision to send Ruby, now a first grader, to a nearby all-white school. It was a difficult decision. The benefit of a good education had to be weighed against the very real threat to little Ruby's safety. Ruby and her mother were escorted to and from school every day by 4 federal marshals during the entire school year. In 1963, as his first assignment for Look magazine, Norman Rockwell created this famous painting, which he called The Problem We All Live With. It was published in the January 1964 issue of Look magazine. Note the garbage that was aimed at the little girl, the N-word prominently displayed, and the letters KKK on the left side. Much later, Ruby observed that even though there were mobs outside that school every day for a whole year, the person that greeted me every morning was a white woman who actually risked her life as well. She was referring to her teacher. The painting hangs in the Norman Rockwell Museum in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. This photo shows Lucille Bridges, Ruby's mom, with the painting. In 2011, Barack Obama had the 3x5 painting hung in a well-trafficked hallway outside the Oval Office. Obama was famously quiet on the subject of race, but the act of hanging the painting was a sharp commentary. Here we see the president and Bridges with the painting. Obama told Bridges, "I think it's fair to say that if it hadn't been for you guys, I might not be here and we might not be looking at this together." Nearly 60 years later, little Ruby's bravery continues to influence our nation.
Thank you, Jean. And before we go on with the main presentation, and before I introduce Alan, I want to thank you very much, Congressman Mike Levin, for being here. I want to also thank your campaign manager, Adam Berkowitz, who I hear is a fantastic staffer. I want to thank Pat, our genius computer expert, Alan, Jean, and all of you who are here today, and of course, Channel 6 for giving us this opportunity. So Alan, our fantastic and favorite secretary of our club, will now introduce Congressman Mike Levin.
Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you to everybody who is here on our Zoom recording this morning. And thank you to everybody watching us on both Village TV and on YouTube. Well, as Rebecca said, we are excited this morning to have Congressman Mike Levin as our speaker. Congressman Levin represents the 49th Congressional District, which is in Orange County here in California. And he was first elected in 2018 as part of, and one of the big reasons for, the blue wave that year. And he was reelected in 2020. Today he's going to give us an update on the environment and climate issues from his vantage point in Washington. And really, there is nobody who is more knowledgeable or better qualified to speak to us on these issues than Congressman Levin. Mike Levin's a graduate of Stanford University and Duke Law School. When he went into private practice after graduation, he specialized in the areas of the environment, climate, and energy. He's been working on these issues for a long time. Before he was in Congress, he was a member of the board of organizations like the Center for Sustained Energy, and he helped co-found an organization called Sustain USC, Sustain OC, which advocates for the quicker transition of our inevitable changeover to more sustainable power and energy sources. Because it's right down the street from us, many of us are familiar with the work that he's done, trying to craft some sort of solution to the seemingly insolvable problem of the decommissioned nuclear power plant at San Onofre and its attendant nuclear waste. He was also, for a while, executive director of the Democratic Party of Orange County before he went to Congress. Now, as all members of the House of Representatives pretty much do, Congressman Levin concentrates on several areas. One of them is Veterans Affairs. He's a member of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, and he's the chairman of the House Veterans Affairs Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity, which is a very good segue into another area he specializes in, and that's the area he's going to speak to us about today: climate change, the environment, but not just the usual set of things that go around those issues, but also helping to recognize and make sure we can take advantage of the economic opportunities that will come from moving to more sustainable forms of energy. Congressman Levin is a member of the House can't spit that one out, House Committee on Natural Resources, and he's also a member of the House Select Committee on Climate Crisis. In addition to a lot of other caucuses and organizations he belongs to in Congress, he's a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. And as the grandchild of Mexican immigrants, he's also a member of the Hispanic Caucus. As I said, many others also. And just before he speaks, I just want to express what Rebecca expressed, both to Congressman Levin for taking his time to speak to us today, and to Adam Berkowitz and the rest of his staff who did such a great job making our life easy and making this happen seamlessly. So now I'm going to shut up, and we're going to listen to what Congressman Mike Levin has to say to us. Congressman.
Well, thank you so much, Alan, for that extremely kind and generous introduction. It's such an honor to be back with the Laguna Woods Democratic Club. As I'd mentioned to a few folks on the Zoom before we started recording, I remember back to 2006 when I first came to the club. It's just a wonderful, wonderful Democratic club. You should be extremely proud. And I'm so happy and thrilled to hear that you all are doing quite well during the pandemic. I know it's been a difficult time for everyone. I was told that around 90% of everyone in Laguna Woods has been vaccinated. That is an extraordinary number, and I'm very, very happy to hear it. Particularly as we see most recently, the data suggests that roughly 99% of all the new hospitalizations, deaths, and serious illnesses related to COVID since January 1st have been among the unvaccinated. So thank you so much. It's great to see some familiar names and faces. There obviously have been many different folks responsible for this great club over the years. I know at least a few that I see on the Zoom, names and faces from my time in past years addressing the club. Although we didn't have Zoom. When I first addressed the Laguna Woods Democratic Club, Zoom wasn't even a thing. So I hope that in all due course, we'll be able to get together in person one of these days. I'd love to do that very much. For those that don't know, I grew up in South Orange County. My family, I was born in LA, and we moved to South Orange County when I was 8. Spent the first 8 years of my life in Long Beach. We moved in, I think, 85 to what was then El Toro, what is today Lake Forest. I think it was incorporated in 91 or 92. And been very proud South Orange County resident, other than college and law school. And when I got back from law school, I knew I wanted to get involved in environmental law and in public law as well, and really had a neat opportunity to work in the clean energy sector, to look at new and exciting technologies that are helping to accelerate the transition to a more sustainable future. Sorry for the phone. Hopefully that won't happen too often. And also I have a 7-year-old and 9-year-old. So if they decide to Zoom bomb us at some point during the proceedings, you are forewarned that that may happen. But they're very cute, I promise you, if they visit us. But long story short, I've been very involved in Democratic politics for a number of years. And in the 2016 election, did all I could to help Secretary Clinton, and was there in New York City on election night, when the unthinkable happened and Donald Trump was elected president of the United States, I resolved right then and there that I would not wait for others to make the kind of changes and protect our democracy and deal with climate change and so many other issues that I care about greatly, that I needed to do it and I needed to take action and not wait for others. So I had to convince my wife that that was a good plan, and I had to build a great team like Adam and so many others. And shortly thereafter, we were up and running. We had a great race. In 2018, we ran in one of the very competitive primaries. As you know, we have the top 2 system in California, and we had a very, very tough primary. We were very grateful to make it through. We won against Diane Harkey. You might remember Diane Harkey, former Assembly member, Board of Equalization member, and Mayor of Dana Point. We won in the general election with a pretty good margin in 2018. Then, of course, in 2020, it was a very unusual election. The pandemic hit, and we couldn't do a lot of the in-person campaigning that we really know. Well, it's the oldest form of campaigning. I would argue it's still the best form of campaigning, the volunteer contact, also the in-person house parties, the in-person town halls. I should also mention my predecessor was Darrell Issa in this district. You've probably heard of Darrell Issa before. He wound up running in the neighboring district. So he retired before the 2018 race. He wound up running in the neighboring district after Duncan Hunter Jr. was indicted and convicted and sentenced, eventually was pardoned by Donald Trump, but did not run for re-election. So Issa wound up running in the neighboring seat to the east. We wound up winning in 2020 by 6%, 6.2% against the former mayor of San Juan Capistrano. And we anticipate a tough 2022 race ahead. And I hope we'll have a chance to speak more about that. But I think 2022 will look a lot more like 2018, both that it will be challenging, but also that we'll have the opportunity to actually get out there and connect voter to voter, door to door, person to person in a way that I think is really powerful and persuasive now, perhaps more than ever, to get out there and speak with voters. A lot of the work that we do in Congress is based on the committees in which we serve. And the committees that I serve, as Alan referenced briefly, House Natural Resources Committee, so everything to do with water and oceans and wildlife and energy and mineral resources, that all falls under the jurisdiction of the committee. One of the efforts I'm very proud of on the committee is an offshore drilling ban that we have introduced for the Southern California coast. Now you might wonder, is that really a threat? And the answer is it could be. So with the last administration, sitting down with the then Interior Secretary, David Bernhardt, I asked Secretary Bernhardt, is the Trump administration going to listen to the will of Californians? Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike. And if there are Republicans and independents watching this, you probably don't want to see drill rigs off the California coast either, or at least not more of them, because of the threat that it would have on our regional economy and our environment. And the Trump administration said that they would not commit to following or respecting the will of Californians when it comes to offshore drilling. So we thought it very important. Well, I'm not at all worried about the Biden administration. I am worried about future administrations and the desire to drill off the California coast. So we're going to stand up strong on that. And we introduced our legislation just about a month and a half ago. We're going to be getting it through the House. I hope we get it through the Senate on the president's desk. I think that would be a huge victory. My district is a coastal district. So this is a very personal issue for me. And as we all enjoy our beautiful coastal environment, I think for all of us. And the district, I should also mention to you, the district includes all of South Orange County. So it starts just south of you. And Dana Point has Dana Point, Rancho Mission Viejo, Rancho Santa Margarita, part of Rancho Santa Margarita, all of San Juan Capistrano, where I live, all of San Clemente, other beautiful unincorporated areas like Ladera Ranch. So basically, I'm right on the border with you. And of course, you never know. In redistricting, I could wind up as your member of Congress, or maybe not. Who knows? Anybody that says they know, they have no idea. We're all just sort of waiting to see what the independent commission will do with regard to district lines. The other committees that I serve, as Alan mentioned, the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. That is a really important group of people. I was really honored to be picked by Speaker Pelosi to serve on that committee as one of 3 freshmen, members of the committee, great honor. And what we did in the last Congress is we put together a bold and comprehensive plan of action that you can actually go and check out if you have the time. It's climate crisis, one word, climatecrisis.house.gov. And you can see our action plan. And there's an executive summary if you don't feel like reading all 500 pages. But what we did is as follows. We addressed it from a scientific perspective. We all know the statistics are daunting. We all see it, experience it. We know the recent extreme weather in the Pacific Northwest is one of many examples, or the drought that we're now experiencing, or the wildfires that we see, the sea level rise that we experience. All of it we know is related to climate change. We know it's at least in part caused by humans, and it's only going to get worse as we continue to emit more greenhouse gases. And so the science suggests that we need bold and comprehensive action to reduce our carbon footprint from a wide variety of sources. Sometimes I'm asked, what do we need to do exactly? Do we all need to go out and lessen our individual carbon footprint by getting a zero emission vehicle? Or do we need to rely more on public transportation? Or do we need to build more energy efficient residential and commercial buildings? Do we need to have a lower carbon power generation where we rely on more renewable sources of electricity, solar and wind? And do we need more storage, utility scale storage from batteries and from other sources? Do we need to have more sustainable agriculture where we actually are using regenerative agriculture and reducing our carbon footprint from the food that we eat? And of course, the answer to all these things is yes. We have to do all of these things, and we have to do them all to whatever extent we can. And we need a broad federal government response. We need a real. We have to be in a position of global leadership again on this issue. We have to be thinking about the climate crisis through the lens of followership. And what I mean by followership is, what are the actions that we can take as the United States where we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions enough where the solutions are actually commensurate with the science? And what are those steps that we can take where the rest of the world will follow, where we're not just going it alone? So the Select Committee set out to do that, and we put together a very comprehensive plan that'll get us about 85% of the way to where we need to be. Now, that's both encouraging and also scary because it's a very comprehensive plan and it only gets us to 85% of the way that we need to be. But I encourage you to check it out. And it's all things that we could and should do. And in fact, we've already started to do with the Biden administration, reversing some of the more onerous executive actions under the Trump administration. You probably are aware that the Trump administration was not pro-environment, that they were not often pro-science. I would go a step further. I believe the Trump administration to be the most anti-environment administration in the modern history of the United States. Let's not forget the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act. They were not partisan in nature. They were bipartisan in nature when they were originally introduced and signed into law. The president at the time, do you all know who the president was when the EPA was created? Anyone? Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon, good Californian, was the president at the time. And he was no champion of the environment, in my opinion. But back then, in the 70s versus today, the polarization of our politics, the politicization of things like clean air and clean water and climate, it's gotten far, far worse, far more partisan in nature than it ever was before. Just the same, take it a step further. In the early 1990s, we dealt with acid rain as a country. And we made amendments to EPA regulations. And George H.W. Bush was president at the time. Fast forward to mid-2000s in California, where we got very aggressive around air quality standards, and we created a cap and trade program in California, a low carbon fuel standard in California. Who was governor when a lot of those things were created? Arnold Schwarzenegger, again, a Republican. And when California, here's a good piece of history. California, as you probably know, if you grew up in California, as I did, with the era of smog alerts. Everybody remembers the smog alerts. When I went outside in South Orange County in the 1980s, often air quality would not be so great. And we cleaned up our act big time. And one of the mechanisms that we use is a waiver from the Federal Clean Air Act that we got way back before the when the Federal Clean Air Act was signed into law. We wanted to go further to reduce tailpipe emissions because of the overwhelming challenges we'd had in California with smog, with particulate matter and NOx and the other criteria air pollutants. The governor at the time, when we got that waiver, was Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, again, no great champion of the environment. But I bring all that up because around the time that Donald Trump became president, something fundamentally changed. And I don't think it was just Donald Trump. I think it was also the campaign finance system. The campaign finance system, after the Citizens United decision, which was a horribly decided Supreme Court opinion, gave carte blanche to big polluters to funnel money to their favorite politicians. And if you want to really understand, so we think about all these challenges that we're facing. We think about all the things that we need to do to solve these challenges with regard to climate. Why is it that when 70 or 80% of the American people want us to solve these problems, why is it that Congress cannot find a way to act? And I would offer to you the biggest reason is because too many politicians of both parties are having their pockets lined by big oil, by fossil fuel, by coal, by natural gas, all of them with the intent of stifling whatever progress we want to make. And I'll let you Google all of that. You can see some of the more recent things have been written about Exxon and other companies with regard to their political involvement. But let me just tell you, it ain't a pretty picture, and it is a big problem, which is why we need fundamental campaign finance reform on top of everything else. I think it's the key that will unlock a lot of necessary action. Now, the president's going to go forward and do a lot on climate. And one of the big things that's happening right now is the new American Jobs Plan. Hopefully you've heard about this American Jobs Plan. Massive infrastructure investment, the biggest that we've had since the days of Franklin Roosevelt. Our infrastructure needs all the help it can get. It is currently, depending on the report you read, the American Society of Civil Engineers gives us about a C or a D, depending on the state that you're looking at. Others have been even less kind than that. But we need to get our infrastructure back to an A. I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can as we fight for that infrastructure framework to act on climate, to make sure that we're providing the proper incentives, the proper structure to ensure that we are in fact accelerating that transition to sustainability. So I recently led a letter of 130 of my fellow Democrats across the ideological spectrum, from the very progressive to the more moderate and conservative, reminding the president of our fundamental principles around climate action and the things that we want to see. Everything from 100% renewables, 100% zero emission vehicles for new car sales in a short period of time. We want to see equity as all of this is moving forward. We want to make sure that we're keeping in mind environmental justice, social justice as well. So I'm encouraged. I'm excited at the opportunity that this administration is providing us to get this done. We've got to get it through, obviously, the Senate. If you've got any friends in West Virginia or Arizona, you might want to encourage them to nudge their senators, Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema, to go along with a reconciliation vehicle around climate and around some other priorities that we have, in addition to the bipartisan infrastructure framework that we know that they support. I'll talk for just a minute or two about a couple of other local environmental issues. You brought up San Onofre. We could have an entire meeting and just discuss San Onofre and the challenges around spent nuclear fuel in the United States. The bottom line is this: we have nowhere to send the waste. So the waste itself at San Onofre is sitting there on the coast. Well, that's a problem, a big problem. It's really just the symptom. The symptom is we have nowhere to send that waste, nowhere to send any of the nation's commercial spent nuclear fuel. And we have to develop solutions, and that's what we're trying to do. When I was elected in 2019, we created a task force headed by the former head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and co-chaired by a retired Navy admiral You can read our report. Maybe Adam can circulate the link. It has all sorts of technical information, but most importantly, it has 8 specific recommendations for the federal government, things the federal government needs to do, and we have already acted and are acting on all 8 of them. Just a couple that I'll mention. One is to have legislation that will say for all of the nation's nuclear fuel, nuclear waste from all the commercial plants, move waste first from those facilities that have the highest seismic risk and the highest population density within 50 miles of the reactor site. Now, we win. I don't know if I want to win on those 2 things, but we win at San Onofre because basically we've got 9 million of all of us within 50 miles of San Onofre, both in Orange and San Diego counties. And we've also got significant earthquake risk. In fact, before they built the plant there, that area was called Earthquake Bay. Probably not the greatest place to build a commercial nuclear power plant, but it is what it is. We also have rising sea levels that are of great concern to me. What is happening right now is the plant is in the process of being decommissioned. The domes, the famous domes everyone knows as they drive down the 5 freeway, those are being taken apart as we speak. I was just there and I saw what they're doing. They have to be very careful about it. And they can take them all apart. They can take out the components, pretty much everything other than the fuel itself, the big fuel rods itself can be moved. They can send it off as lower level waste to a site in Utah. And that's what they're doing. They have a rail line that literally goes right up to those domes. They're loading rail cars. They're moving pretty much everything other than the waste, the actual nuclear rods themselves to Utah. Now, what to do with the rods themselves? There are about 130 canisters that will be filled when all is said and done with this nuclear fuel with nowhere to send it. So we need somewhere to send it permanently, not just for San Onofre, but all across the country. We don't have that today. We invested in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, $16 billion of taxpayer money in Yucca Mountain in Nevada. You've heard of Yucca Mountain in Nevada? We have not moved a single fuel rod to Yucca Mountain, and we won't anytime soon. The Biden administration doesn't want to do it. The Trump administration didn't want to do it. The Obama administration didn't want to do it. And this all started when Harry Reid was the majority leader of the United States Senate. And I guarantee you that my colleagues from Nevada do not want the waste moved to Nevada. I know because I talk to them all the time about it. I've been there. There are potentially some legitimate technical concerns around geology, around groundwater. And but the reality is we invested a whole lot of time and money with no plan B. There was no plan B. So we've got to work on a plan B. And that's what we're trying to do. And we're going to need everyone's help and support in the coming months, the coming years. It's a problem that was not created overnight. It took tens of years for us to get where we are today. It's going to take time for us to fix this problem, to create that repository, to look at things like interim storage while we're developing that repository. The key is my objective will remain, has been from day one of my service, will remain as long as I have the honor to serve, to get that waste off our coast as quickly and as safely as we can. So we're working on a lot of other local environmental issues as well. Bluff erosion, bluff collapses, coastal erosion, huge problem in our district. Water quality is always a concern of mine. Plastic pollution is a big concern of mine. And I'm really honored to get the opportunity to serve as all the committees of jurisdiction do their work. I'm really honored to be right in the thick of things. As Alan mentioned, I'll close with this. I also serve on the Veterans Affairs Committee. I chair one of the subcommittees responsible for veteran employment, veteran housing, veteran transition into civilian life, veteran homelessness. And I also serve on the Veterans Health Subcommittee as well. And so I thank all of our veterans. Usually if we were in a room together, I would ask the veterans to raise their hand and then ask for applause. We will have to do that virtually today. So if you are a veteran, I thank you for all that you have done to defend and honor our country. My grandfather was a World War II veteran. I miss him very much. And I think about him every single day when I think about our men and women in service today and that legacy that he left and what he would want to see I know he'd want his youngest grandson fighting like crazy for that democracy that he fought for when he went overseas in World War II. So with that, I'm very grateful. Obviously, we would love your help and support for the campaign moving forward. We're going to need all the help we can get. With that, I will turn it over back to Alan or back to Rebecca. And happy to have a Q&A with the time that we have left, and look forward to seeing you all in person soon.
Well, I'll take it. This is Alan. Thank you so much, Congressman Levin. We really appreciate your remarks, and we appreciate very much the work that you do on these issues for us in Washington. So we do, as you might imagine, we do have some questions, and I'm going to just start with a kind of a simple one. It concerns the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus in Washington. Is that something you belong to now, and is it something you would consider joining? And if yes or if no, why? What are the reasons? What would be your reasons?
Well, the caucus is somewhat dormant, that Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus. It was designed to push some specific legislation, which is good legislation, which I've co-sponsored. It had, to my knowledge, that Climate Solutions Caucus isn't actively meeting. The people that are meeting are the groups that I'm involved in. If the Climate Solutions Caucus starts to meet up, I'll be happy to join them as well. But the real action is happening on the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis that I serve on something called SEEK, it's Sustainable Environment and Energy Caucus, I believe is what that stands for. That meets quite often. And then the Republicans now have a climate caucus as well. I am all for Republicans coming to the table with viable solutions once they acknowledge the threat that exists, once they acknowledge the science and accept the science. Some people say, well, I believe in climate change. It's nothing to believe in. You either accept the data, accept the science for the fact, for the objective fact that it presents, and you deal with it, or you don't. And so we have some Republicans, and I'm actually encouraged that my friend John Curtis of Utah, former mayor of Provo, he's a very conservative guy, but he's a friend and he's a reasonable guy. I think he wants to fix some of the misinformation in his party. But the reality is, I would love to work on a bipartisan basis on these issues. In fact, I have done more on a bipartisan basis with regard to environmental policy than I ever thought I would in Congress. And I think there's a great deal of room to grow there if the Republican Party actually adheres to science as opposed to fiction.
Yeah, this is I guess this is a related question, some of which you touched on in your answer to this. But one of the people on the Zoom who's a member of the Citizens Climate Lobby wants, first of all, thank you for co-sponsoring the Innovations in Carbon Dividend Act 2021. And their question is, which you've touched on, what do you think the chances are of getting Republican support for this specific act? And I mean, how do you go about doing that? We get to see the.
Yeah, it's not easy. And whoever on the Zoom is part of CCL, I'm very grateful for your activism. I was on with CCL not long ago and actually had lunch yesterday with the group in San Juan Capistrano. One of the folks there was Larry Kramer, who does a lot with the South Orange County chapter of CCL, former San Juan city councilman, and worked on nuclear submarines for the Navy. Very smart guy. And, I firmly believe that we need some sort of carbon pricing, whether it's the fee and dividend mechanism that CCL has championed, or whether it's something similar. I know former Congressman Inglis was a big leader on this and is a big leader on this. My hope is that we can try to get some sort of carbon trading mechanism, clean energy standards, something big and bold in the reconciliation vehicle. Evergreen Action is a great organization that put together a white paper explaining why a clean energy standard could actually fit reconciliation. Now, let me take a step back. If you have not heard of reconciliation, I will briefly explain that we can get around the filibuster. The filibuster requires that you have 60 votes in the Senate, and I think that needs to be reformed. But again, Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, a handful of others do not agree. So how do we then move forward with legislation that doesn't require the 60 votes? And you can do it via a process called budget reconciliation. The good part with that is that you only need 50 votes plus Vice President Harris to pass legislation. That's what we did with the American Rescue Plan for COVID. The downside is that reconciliation does not allow for anything that is not directly relevant to the budget. So think of revenue, think of taxation. It's got to be directly related to that. So as an example, in the American Rescue Plan, we wanted to have a $15 living wage, which is also long overdue. And the Senate parliamentarian decided, you know what, that doesn't fit. It's more of a policy decision, less of a budget, less of a revenue, less of a taxation measure. The same could happen with some of the provisions that we'd like to see, in climate legislation or in healthcare legislation, you name it. But what I know is happening right now is that we're moving forward on two tracks. The first track is on this bipartisan infrastructure framework, which is now supported by 22 senators and counting, 11 Republicans, 11 Democrats that came together and negotiated this framework. It's a good framework. I just don't think it goes far enough in certain ways. What's in it is good. Roads, bridges, broadband, all of that is important. Water, all of it is important, but it doesn't include some key climate provisions that I think are necessary. So then you look at reconciliation and doing another bill, and that's what we're doing as well. Bernie Sanders and John Yermuth are the chairs of the budget committees, respectively, in the Senate and the House. They're working on a budget resolution that will set a top line number, and then we will backfill policy into that top line number. That's exactly what we did with the American Rescue Plan. And so all of this is going to happen. It's exciting. Buckle your seatbelts for the next few months in Washington. It's going to be fun. And I hope that we'll look back and we'll be very proud about what we were able to accomplish. And I hope that some sort of carbon trading mechanism is included in all of that, Alan.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, that question was from Ann Beltran. She's the member of Citizens Climate Lobby. So
thank you, Ann.
Give her credit. Credit is
Now is
due.
a good time. If CCL has an active membership in West Virginia or Arizona, now is a good time for them to speak up.
Absolutely. Well, what I wanted to ask you about, next question is about a kind of long-range planning. I mean, we just see the problems that we have getting countries to agree to cut down their greenhouse emissions and to a level that's sustainable right now. So is it possible even to do any long-term planning on what we can do to manage these things in the long run rather than just in the short run, trying to get people to cut down their greenhouse emissions?
Yes. So the good news, Alan, is that we have already done quite a bit of that planning. Thanks to the Obama administration, we entered into the Paris Climate Agreement that set pretty good standards for the world, with our own national determined contributions. And of course, President Obama led and got the rest of the world on board, including China. They were not so excited about this at first, but he got pretty much every industrialized nation in the world, and it was a huge accomplishment. And then, of course, President Trump, because he thought everything Obama did was wrong, immediately said, we're going to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement, but with the caveat being that if we won the election in 2020, we would get right back in as if we never left. And, knock wood, that's exactly what happened. So I even have a button somewhere that says, we're back in. And so we are back in, and I was so the UN helps shepherd a lot of this work. That's where the Paris Agreement back in 2015, in Paris as part of the UN climate conference, they call it the COP. And I went to the COP last year in Madrid, or 2019. They delayed it, obviously with the pandemic, they couldn't do it. But 2019, I went, and it was really sad because all the other industrialized nations of the world were still fighting to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. except the United States did not really have a big presence there, other than to try to export natural gas to the developing world. And so we were trying to actually promote fossil fuels. I say we, the Trump administration. So I was there with the speaker. I was there with a congressional delegation, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse and a number of my colleagues in Congress, saying, hey, wait, the Trump administration does not speak for us all. And if we win in 2020, we're going to be right back here leading the way again. So I'll be very excited. I get to go back in November to Scotland, to the COP26 in Glasgow, and we're back. And we have to do things, as I said at the outset, Alan, it's got to be about followership. So if we do things in a vacuum, if we reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, but we don't take steps to do so in a way that is not only environmentally the right thing to do, but economically the right thing to do. My belief is that if we do these things that we set out, they will be huge from an economic perspective. Because as we think about the next 20 or 30 years, you've got all of these new technologies. Think about electric vehicles, right? Think about sustainable building materials. We should own the technology. We should own the manufacturing. We should own the supply chain, not allow China or India or other countries to dominate these industries. And in 20, 30 years' time, I want to be able to say that the technologies that we all use, they were developed, manufactured, innovated right here in the United States of America. If we fail to do that, we're still going to be using these technologies. They're just going to be developed elsewhere, China or India or elsewhere. And I think that would be a massive mistake, a massive mistake. So I'm all in on things like the supply chain for electric vehicles, for example, building them here with good jobs that pay good wages, not just buying cars that are, manufactured in China or elsewhere, as one of many examples. So we've got a lot of work to do. I think we can do it. We're going to need, I think, to turn the temperature down on the politics and get to the science again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Just want to go off the environment topic for a question. It's an important question, things that's on people's minds is talking about gerrymandering and voting rights. Now, we've seen the Supreme Court, I don't know if they're through murdering the Voting Rights Act, but it's in the process of being assassinated. There's really no doubt about that. And look at it, I forget the election, but in statewide election in Ohio, Democrats got very close to 50% of the vote and ended up with 4 out of 16 congressional seats. In Pennsylvania, we know that Democrats had I think 2 or 3 congressional seats out of 16. They redistricted, the court forced them to redistrict in a different way, and they ended up splitting the seats 8 and 8. In North Carolina, it was the same thing as Ohio, 13 districts, 50% of the vote for Democrats, 3 congressional seats. HR 1 seems to be the only vehicle that's available right now to address these issues. But is there any way HR 1 or something that would address these issues? Is there any path for that short of the Senate removing the filibuster? Do you see any path for that to take hold?
Well, that is the path. I had a long chat with John Sarbanes, Congressman from Maryland, who wrote HR 1. I want to say now I spoke with him at length about 3-4 weeks ago. And I asked him the same question, Alan, is there a path here other than eliminating the filibuster? And, what I would like to see President Biden do is get Joe Manchin and let's say Lisa Murkowski or Susan Collins, one of the Republicans, get them in a room and tell them to work out a bipartisan deal on voting rights, maybe akin to the proposal that Manchin offered before the Senate voted. And they voted not even to allow debate. It wasn't that they voted against HR 1. They voted not even to allow debate on HR 1. It was pathetic. It is pathetic. But anyway, I would like to Manchin and one of the Republicans come together with a bipartisan proposal. And then I'd like to see if the Senate, when the Senate votes that down, if they vote that down, or if it doesn't get the 60 votes necessary, at that point, maybe that will wake up Joe Manchin. Will wake up Kirsten Sinema. I was encouraged just this morning that my friend, the majority whip of the House, Jim Clyburn, is now openly advocating for President Biden to signal that the filibuster should be, if not eliminated entirely, should be there should be an exception, a carve out for voting rights. I would encourage everybody to watch the movie All In. It's you can get it on Amazon. I'm not promoting Amazon, just to be clear, but that movie is Stacey Abrams' movie, and about half of it is about Stacey Abrams and her life, which is just remarkable, and then the other half is voting rights and her path to try to protect voting rights. One of the things that the movie really hammers home that I didn't fully appreciate, but makes perfect sense. John Roberts, we think of Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice Roberts as being a reasonable person. On voting rights, he's terrible. On voting rights, he clerked for William Rehnquist. He has been a consistent opponent of voting rights. Just the same, Brett Kavanaugh has a long history of being really, really bad on voting rights. And don't even get me started on Thomas or Alito or Barrett. So we're sort of stuck with these folks who are now a consistent 6-3 block against voting rights. We saw that, the Shelby versus Holder decision was a 5-4 decision. These two most recent decisions were 6-3 decisions. The only way we're going to push back against that Supreme Court precedent now is with legislation. And that's where HR 1 becomes even more important, or a compromised version of HR 1 becomes even more important. The most significant provisions of HR 1 that we have to get across the finish line are the independent redistricting commissions and the campaign finance provisions. If we get just those two things, now all the other voting provisions are all very important as well, but I'd like to see those two things actually come to fruition. That would be so, so powerful. The other thing I'll mention is we are going to advance the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act in the House. That'll be coming as well, but that should not be a substitute for HR 1. It is a supplement. That deals specifically with the idea of pre-clearance, which is the concept that states ought to, there ought to be a check on states trying to diminish voting rights. And that'll go head to head with what the Supreme Court just decided was the intent of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So we'll have to, to pass the John Lewis bill to make it very clear where Congress stands with regard to voting rights. So a lot more will happen. My big concern is that it will not happen in time for the 2022 election because, Alan, as you correctly point out, a lot of those states are already being dramatically gerrymandered by Republican legislatures.
Right. Just a quick addition to that question. Is it possible, because HR 1 contains setup of citizens commissions to do redistrict, if there's money in that bill to fund these commissions, could it possibly go through reconciliation, or is that too much of a stretch? Not that you're parliamentarian.
Yeah, I think that we ought to try. And I've brought that up. We ought to see which provisions would be considered within order for reconciliation. And I think Chuck Schumer has heard that message from our caucus loud and clear.
Okay, all right. And we're running kind of late on time, so this might be the last question. I'm not sure, but I want to ask you about the desalinization plant they're thinking of building down in Huntington Beach. I know Israel gets almost all of its water from desalinization. And I know also that Australia built, I think, 5, maybe it's 3 desalinization plants and realized that they couldn't use them because they're too expensive to use. So what do you think about the whole process? And do you think Huntington Beach is an appropriate place for it?
Well, what I know is that we have the largest desal plant in the Western Hemisphere in my district, the Bud Lewis plant in Carlsbad, and they're expanding it from 50 million gallons a day to 60 million gallons a day. I also have been to Israel to those desal plants there. There's actually a great book, people really want to dig into it, called Let There Be Water, about Israel's transition. Now, Israel has unique geographic limitations, and they've had to rely on recycling and on desalination for a lot of their supply. I think they recycle something unbelievable, like 85–90% of their water. So truly incredible. There are also great recycling projects going on in Orange County. You probably know about the Fountain Valley project. We can't call it toilet to tap. They don't like that. Call it showers to flowers. That's the correct verbiage. But I know the Poseidon project has been something that they have considered and gone back and forth seemingly for as long as I can remember. It's been 20 or 30 years now. And I would never get in the front of the residents of Huntington Beach to determine what's best for their community if they want that facility. What I can tell you is that technology has improved significantly. The ability to have lower emissions power generation on site, to utilize renewables, perhaps solar with batteries, for example, to generate the electricity. So you don't have the criteria pollutant emissions when you do generators, burning off NOx and particulate matter. That's good. And then the second important environmental concern is the impact on marine life. We don't really have a definitive answer of wide scale. If you do wide scale desal, what is the impact on a lower salinity ocean? We don't know the answer to that. There are a lot of really good studies out there. Some of the leaders on it are the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, which is at the very southern tip of my district in La Jolla. And their best scientists believe that so long as you don't solely rely on desalination, so long as it is part of a portfolio of things like recycling and otherwise, then it's probably all right. I know that the technology has improved dramatically with regard to the way they are able to do the slant well drilling, as they call it. They're looking at doing one here where I live in off Doheny Beach, right down the street from my house. And so I'm keeping an eye on it. I do think that to the extent that we fund any of these projects, they have to use environmental best practices. I also know that California, in the years ahead and the decades ahead, we're going to have real trouble with water. We have decimated our groundwater in the Central Valley, and it's only going to get more difficult, not easier, in the decades ahead. And so we're going to need a diverse portfolio of solutions to be able to address the water challenges that we're going to face.
Thank you very much. So that is the time we have. That was the last question we have time for. So I want to apologize.
Yeah, let me just say thank you. This was fantastic. And I hope that we can meet up in person very soon. If you are interested in volunteering, Adam, do you want to spend 1 minute and talk about how people can volunteer? Oh, Adam is muted. There, now he's unmuted. There you go.
How about now?
Perfect.
Excellent. Want to also thank everybody. Really appreciate you having us today. And as Mike said, this is going to look, we think, like 2018 more so than last year. So if anybody's interested in making phone calls, knocking on doors, any kind of help, we would love to have you. I'll put my email in the chat, and you can just send me an email and let us know.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Congressman Levin. Really appreciate you being here, and Adam, we really appreciate you very, very much. And I apologize to people's questions. There were good questions on the chat. Some people submitted questions beforehand. They were all good questions. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to get to them, but we have our time.
Yeah, everybody can also always email us. Adam is going to use email, and if there are questions that you have, I'll be happy to try to get to them by email.
Thank you very much.
Congressman Levin and Adam, for all of us here, and for Sue Deering, our president, who couldn't be here with us today, but I'm sure she's going to be watching this video again and again and again. She finally had a chance to meet with her children and grandchildren after a year and a half. And for myself, Rebecca Gilad, vice president of the club, I thank you very, very much. You'll be hearing from us a lot.
Fantastic. I look forward to that. And I'm so glad everyone is doing well and staying healthy and safe and vaccinated. And go have a fantastic weekend, because it's going to be a beautiful weekend.
Do our best, we promise.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.